Hello, everybody. I want to talk about the perils of part-time workplace. As we've seen, there's been a great increase in the number of part-time employees and temporary workers in the United States. This trend has been encouraged by the high cost of labor, not only in wages but in benefits. For instance, today, for every dollar you spend on salary or wages, you spend an additional 35 to 40 cents for benefits. After World War II, it was only 5 cents. So it's went up anywhere from 7 to 8 times more expensive today for benefits than it was about 60 years ago. And that's a percentage, not just the dollars. So it's much more expensive to employ people today. And as a result, we see more people moving towards temporary and part-time workers to hire in an organization because it's simply much cheaper. Oftentimes, part-time workers don't have the level of benefits that full-time workers do. Some, of course, you have to pay. Social Security you have to pay. Unemployment you have to pay, regardless if they're a part-time or a full-time employee. But many of the others you don't. And therefore, it's much cheaper to have part-time workers than full-time workers. That's some of the advantages. There's also disadvantages to a largely part-time or temporary workplace. What are they? Some of the more important include, first, there's a lower sense of loyalty to the organization. Part-time workers, in a way, come and go. They don't feel the need to stay in an organization if a better opportunity arises. They have little invested in that organization. When you have little invested, then you're certainly not going to stay because they haven't also made a commitment to you. Therefore, you don't really have a commitment to them. If you offer somebody a full-time job, often known as a permanent job, even though few jobs are permanent, people tend to stay more than if they were to be a temporary or part-time worker. Second is that there's lower skills for part-time employees. That often arises because when you get a job as a part-time employee, an organization is hesitant to spend much money on your training and development because they feel you're not going to be around, that you're going to take what you learned and go to another organization. This often isn't the most advantageous. And so, less training and development is offered towards part-time employees, which means that often part-time employees have lower skills. If they work in your workplace, they may not be as productive and perform as well as full-time employees who've received quite a bit of training. That can be disadvantageous to your organization. Third is that there could be a lower level of teamwork and partnership when you have a largely part-time workplace. Connections are important. I call them opportunities for interaction. When people get to work together and trust each other, they're more likely to share and discuss aspects in the workplace. This could lead to a greater sense of innovation and creativity. But when you have part-time employees, more transitory, some coming and some going, then they typically don't develop the relationships among themselves and also with full-time workers. As a result, you don't have that level of trust between employees and also that level of interaction. So you typically have less creativity and innovation, and you have a largely temporary or part-time workplace. Fourth is that the learning curve for part-time employees is often greater and more frequent. This also has much more of an impact on the organization. When you have people who don't stay in the organization very often, very long, and you have their replacements hired on a frequent basis, you're going to have to continually train those employees on what they need to do. This diverts attention from full-time employees who have their own jobs. Instead, they have to continually train other people. They also have to do it more frequently. This is a drain on the organization. It takes resources away from meeting the important objectives, strategic and otherwise, of the organization, and instead spending time on training part-time employees. And lastly, customer service falters. This is often because, similar to building relationships with coworkers, employees do build relationships with their customers. At least we hope they do. When you build this relationship, especially if it's a positive one of trust, then customers are most likely going to return to the business to do their shopping. However, when employees come and go, it's hard to develop those kinds of permanent relationships with those customers that'll last over the long time and the long term. So those are the reasons why a part-time workplace may not be the most advantageous. Lower sense of loyalty to the organization, lower skills for part-time employees, which means lower productivity, lower level of teamwork or partnerships among employees. Fourth is the learning curve for employees is often greater and more frequent, diverting attention from full-time employees learning their own job are doing their own job and instead having to spend time on part-time employees. And lastly, customer service does falter. Those are disadvantages, but it has to be compared against the advantages of lower wages. In some cases, it's much more advantageous to pay significantly less in wages. In other cases, it may not be the most opportune strategy to hire a largely part-time workplace. Hope this helps you as you make that important decision. Take care.